In a quiet, Oregon grocery store, a routine shopping trip erupts into a gut-wrenching confrontation when Edith, an elderly woman with a venomous glare, hurls a vicious demand at Marcus, a young black man, to go back to Africa, her words slicing through the air, freezing every shopper in a tense, suffocating silence as a nearby mother gasps audibly and a man shouts, "She's right, send him back." What he says next doesn't just silence the room, it changes everything. The grocery store was alive with the hum of daily errands, punctuated by the faint buzz of a flickering fluorescent light casting uneven shadows and the static-laced drone of a radio talk show railing against outsiders ruining our town. Shoppers pushed their carts through the aisles, some lost in thought, others chatting quietly. A tense exchange erupted near the cereal aisle as two shoppers argued over a dented can, their voices sharp and accusing, hinting at an undercurrent of unease. It was a rainy morning in a small neighborhood in Oregon, a place where everyone seemed to know everyone. But today, the usual flow of routine would break in the most unexpected way. Near the produce section, an elderly woman, probably in her late 70s, stood adjusting her glasses. She had an air of impatience, muttering under her breath, as she reached for a bag of apples. Her faded cardigan and carefully pinned silver hair gave her an unassuming look, but what followed was anything but. A young black man, tall and dressed casually in a green hoodie and jeans, approached the same stand, reaching for a bag of oranges nearby. His name was Marcus. He was calm, polite, and seemed to blend effortlessly into the flow of the store. He was texting on his phone while balancing a basket of groceries when it happened. The elderly woman, whose name was Edith, turned sharply, noticing Marcus's presence, and her expression shifted. It wasn't subtle. Her eyes narrowed, and her lips pursed tightly. She slammed the bag of apples onto the stand, the thud echoing. "You people don't belong here," she said loudly enough for others nearby to hear. Marcus froze, his fingers hovering over his phone. When he looked up, she continued, her tone sharp and cutting. "Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from? We're taking this country back from people like you." A man in a flannel shirt nearby whispered a slur under his breath, then called out, "Finally, someone's standing up for us." The air seemed to thicken. A couple of shoppers nearby stopped in their tracks. Some exchanged uncomfortable glances while others pretended not to hear. The rhythm of the store halted, replaced by an awkward silence that stretched far too long. Marcus's initial reaction was shock. His brow furrowed, and for a moment it looked like he might say something immediately, but he didn't. Inside his heart raced. Anger, hurt, and memories of his mother's warnings about moments like this clashed in his mind. Not again, he thought, not here. He clenched his fist, tempted to shout back, but his father's voice echoed, "Anger buries truth." Instead, he took a slow breath, his face unreadable, as though he was weighing every possible response. Edith, still clutching her apples, stood her ground, unapologetic and firm. Shoppers' eyes locked on Marcus, their whispers sharp and expectant. A young mother quickly steered her child away, while an older man near the potatoes glanced nervously at Marcus, waiting to see what he would do. A cashier, barely 18, took a hesitant step forward, her voice trembling as she said, "Ma'am, please," but Edith's glare silenced her. A woman in a red coat sneered. What's he gonna do, cause a scene? The silence that followed was heavier than any words, setting the stage for what would come next. For a moment, Marcus stood completely still, his hand gripping the handle of his grocery basket. The world around him seemed to shrink. Every sound in the store muffled. Every face turned in his direction. The weight of Edith's words hung in the air like a bad smell no one could escape. Edith didn't back down. Her stance was defiant, as though she expected no argument. She adjusted her cardigan with a huff, her chin lifted in a way that dared him to respond. A young employee stacking bananas a few feet away froze mid-motion, unsure whether to step in or stay out of it. A cashier craned her neck to get a better view. The growing crowd didn't move closer, but they didn't leave either. They were witnesses now, like it or not. Marcus glanced at Edith, his face calm but his eyes full of thought. 1,000 responses raced through his mind. He could lash out, yell, or storm off, but none of those options felt right. The tension pressed on him like a weight, but instead of breaking, he allowed himself a moment to breathe. He shifted his basket to his other hand and straightened his posture, his presence growing larger in the silence. His voice, when it came, was calm but deliberate, cutting through the awkward atmosphere. "Ma'am," he began, his tone measured, "do you even realize what you just said?" His question wasn't accusatory. It was reflective, almost like he was giving her a chance to think about her words. But she didn't seem interested in reflection. "I said what I said," she snapped, her voice rising. "This is my country. People like you don't belong here. That was it." A young woman near the bread aisle gasped audibly, and the quiet murmur of the crowd grew louder. Yet Marcus remained steady. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't take a step closer. Instead, he let the pause stretch, giving her words a chance to settle into the ears of everyone around them. "All right," he said finally, nodding slowly. His calmness was disarming, almost unsettling in its strength. "Let's talk about that since you brought it up." The room held its breath, waiting for his response. The storm was coming, but it wasn't the kind anyone expected. Marcus shifted his weight, setting his basket down on the floor with deliberate care. His calmness felt like gravity, pulling everyone closer, even those pretending not to listen. He fixed his gaze on Edith, not with anger, but with a kind of quiet determination that made her shift uncomfortably. "You said I don't belong here," he began, his voice steady but firm. "But let me tell you something about where I come from." His words carried weight, each one spoken like it had been carefully chosen. "My great-grandfather was born in Alabama," he said, pausing just enough to let the words sink in. "Arlo Manzuki was a sharecropper, working land he didn't own, breaking his back so his kids might have a better life. His father, he was a slave, kidnapped, beaten, sold, like property. And for what? To help build the very country you're standing in." Edith's lips tightened, but she said nothing. The crowd, however, was transfixed. A man near the dairy section who had been glancing at his phone put it down entirely. An older couple whispered to each other, but didn't look away. "My grandfather," Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength, "fought in World War II. Fought for a country that sent him overseas to risk his life, only to treat him like dirt when he came back. Couldn't sit at the same counters, couldn't drink from the same fountains. But he stayed. You know why? Because he believed in this country's promise, even when it didn't believe in him." A hush fell over the room. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed quieter now. "And my parents," he went on, his tone softening but losing none of its intensity, "they fought too. Not with guns or fists, but by working every day, raising me to believe in kindness, respect, and hard work. My mother's a teacher. She spent her whole life helping kids, no matter what they look like. I remember when she was spat on outside her school for daring to teach integrated classes, but she went back the next day, head held high. Just last month, a kid in her class was told he'd never amount to anything because of his skin. She fought for him, got him a scholarship, and now he's headed to college. My father? He's a mechanic, the kind of man who'd stop on the side of the road to help someone like you if your car broke down." He paused, letting his story resonate before continuing, his eyes still locked on hers. "So, you're telling me I don't belong here? That I should go back to Africa?" He shook his head slightly, his voice now carrying a hint of sadness. "Now, I am as much a part of this country as you are, maybe even more, because my family paid the price for it, in blood, sweat, and tears. You stand here claiming this is your country, but what have you done to earn it? Have you ever had to fight just to be seen as human?" Edith's face twitched, her eyes flickering with something, defiance or doubt, it was hard to tell. Marcus took a step back, his composure unshaken. "I could have walked away," he said, addressing the entire crowd now. "But what good would that do? Ignorance doesn't get better in silence. It's up to all of us to be better than this, to be better than words like those." The weight of his words lingered, but the story wasn't over yet. The crowd's reaction would speak louder than anything else. The silence after Marcus's words was almost deafening. For a moment, no one moved. Edith's face was a patchwork of emotions: anger, embarrassment, and something deeper, something that looked almost like shame. She glanced around the crowd, as if searching for an ally, but the response was mixed. A burly man in a trucker hat stepped forward, his voice booming. "She's just saying what everyone's thinking. This is our town." His words ignited a spark of division, but before he could continue, a woman in her 30s, clutching a loaf of bread, shot back. "No, it's not. He's more American than your hate ever will be." A teenager nearby scoffed. "He's just stirring trouble. Why can't he let it go?" prompting an older man to snap, "Because he shouldn't have to." Voices clashed, some cheering Marcus, others muttering dissent. A middle-aged man with a baseball cap stepped forward, his voice calmer but firm. "He's right," he said, breaking the quiet. "We've got to be better than this." His words seemed to break a spell. An older woman near the frozen foods aisle nodded. "My dad fought in that same war," she said softly, her voice trembling. "He always said the only color that mattered was the red on the flag." A young cashier, no older than 20, called out from her station. "I've never seen anyone handle something like that so gracefully. Thank you." Edith, now visibly flustered, clutched her cart tightly. She didn't apologize, but the fire in her eyes had dimmed. Her voice, when it finally came, was quieter, almost pleading. "I didn't mean," she started, but stopped herself. Marcus turned back to her, his expression softer now. "It's not about what you meant," he said gently. "It's about how it came across. Words matter. Actions matter even more." A man from the deli counter clapped slowly, breaking the tension. It was hesitant at first, but then others joined in, the sound swelling into something undeniable. People clapped not just for Marcus's words, but for the courage it took to confront hate with dignity. Edith looked around one last time, her face pale, before quietly wheeling her cart toward the exit. As she walked away, a few people moved to comfort Marcus. One woman placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Thank you for saying what needed to be said." Marcus smiled faintly, lifting his basket back into his hand. "Sometimes," he said, almost to himself, "it's not about winning or losing. It's about making sure people hear the truth." The crowd slowly dispersed, the tension in the air replaced by a sense of reflection. Some looked inspired, others thoughtful, but everyone seemed changed in some small way. The moment had passed, but the impact of Marcus's words was far from over. Just then, the store manager approached, his face apologetic but firm. "Sir, I'm sorry, but could you leave? We don't want more trouble." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded, his voice low. "I came to buy groceries, not cause a scene, but truth isn't trouble." As the crowd returned to their routines, the atmosphere in the grocery store felt different, quieter, more thoughtful. Marcus finished his shopping, his steps measured, as if he were carrying the day's injustice like a quiet burden. At the checkout line, the young cashier who had spoken up earlier scanned his items, her eyes glistening with tears. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My brother, he's faced the same thing. Thank you for standing up." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "We keep going," he said softly, "for people like your brother." Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, casting a soft haze across the parking lot. As Marcus walked to his car, a man, the same one in the flannel shirt who'd whispered earlier, blocked his path, his face red with anger. "You think you're some hero?" he spat. Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm just a man buying groceries," he said evenly. "If that scares you, that's your problem." The man hesitated, then stormed off, leaving Marcus to load his bags in silence. He noticed Edith sitting in her car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. For a moment, he thought about walking over to her, but decided against it. Some lessons take time to settle, and he had already said what needed to be said. Later that evening, Marcus sat with his father at the kitchen table, recounting the day's events. His father, whose name was James, a man of few words, listened intently, his hands folded on the table. His cousin, visiting from out of town, interrupted, voice sharp. "Why'd you even engage, Marcus? She's just an old lady speaking her mind." James's eyes flashed. "Her mind's poison, and silence lets it spread." "You did the right thing, son," James said finally. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who was watching. People like her. She might not change overnight, but you planted a seed. That's all you can do sometimes. Plant the seed and let it grow. Marcus nodded, his father's words resonating deeply. He realized that while the encounter had been uncomfortable, it was necessary. Ignorance doesn't change unless it's confronted, and silence only allows it to fester. Across town, Edith sat at her dining table, staring at the untouched plate of food in front of her. Marcus's words replayed in her mind, each one unraveling the certainties she'd clung to for decades. The next day, she found herself at a local community center, hesitantly attending a diversity workshop, her hands trembling as she listened to stories like she thought of her own grandchildren, of the world they were growing up in, and for the first time she felt a pang of something unfamiliar: doubt. The story of Marcus's stand swept through the Oregon neighborhood like wildfire, igniting heated exchanges in homes and schools. A shaky cell phone video of the confrontation went viral online, igniting a storm of support and vitriol that divided the town. A local pastor preached on forgiveness, while a barroom argument erupted over who belongs. At a packed town hall, Marcus spoke, his voice unwavering. "Hearts don't change through fights, but through who we are, every single day. Will you stand up when hate speaks, or let it fester in silence?" A heckler shouted, "You're dividing us, not uniting us." Marcus faced him, unflinching. "Truth divides before it unites. It's the only way forward." The crowd rose, tears streaking faces, applause thundering. Edith, wrestling with her beliefs, faced her son's dismissive prejudice at a tense family dinner, her voice shaking as she echoed, "Marcus, words matter." Her son stormed out, leaving her alone with her doubts. She began to shift, haunted by Marcus's truth and her grandchildren's future. This moment teaches us that silence fuels ignorance, but one brave voice can shatter it, rippling through hearts and history. Share this story. Let it ignite change. Have you faced or fought prejudice? Has truth ever cost you a relationship? Drop your story in the comments. Together, we'll amplify courage and unity.